You are Locked On Falcons POSTCAST, part of Locked On Sports Atlanta on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked On Falcons POSTCAST, your home for the best Atlanta Falcons football talk. It's local insight you can't get anywhere but right here at Locked On. I'm your host, Tanitra Batiste. Alongside me are Jarvis Davis and Aaron Freeman. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply, and the Locked On Falcons POSTCAST is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So today's show will talk about, there was a conspicuous absence that we saw on offense. We'll talk about that. And we'll talk about something that was absent, not so much on the defensive side of the ball, but in special teams and whether or not we should be concerned. But first things first, we'll take you to the happy place for both JD and Free, and that is on the defensive side of the ball. The Falcons played their second preseason game, taking on the Ravens today, falling just short 13-12. Although I do like the play calling and the moxie to go for the 2-point conversion. So not so much of a focus on the loss as opposed to the play call. But by all accounts, the Falcons defense actually showed up pretty big at training camp this week. And you saw that manifest itself, I felt like, on the field today, again, regardless of that final score. So for you, JD, let's talk about who specifically stood out.
Oh, it's a Ruke. Yeah, when you think about,
he was that dog today. He was that guy.
Look, I just gotta go bring it on out. Yeah, Aaron, that's how I'm starting this thing off today, because I've been calling the man out. I've been talking about him. I've been saying, hey man, where's Ruke? I need to see Ruke. He's a second round pick. I need to see it. But yeah, today it was so cool to see Ruke, come out there like he did and just using his hands, man. I just absolutely love when defensive linemen just working those hands. Even if the move doesn't work, I still want you to use them bad boys. Be intentional when you're rushing the passer. And that's what you saw when he did that slap rip move, boom. And the offensive lineman had those shoulder turns. It was OV. And he just kissed Josh Johnson right in the face, like, come here, you 25-year veteran, let me put you on your back, So yeah, when you think about that aspect of it and the mindset that they've been having at practice, and Jimmy Lake has been trying to establish, hey, we want to be able to turn over the ball. Hey, we want to be able to compete amongst each other. Healthy competition, right? About who's getting the ball out, who's picking the ball off, who's putting the quarterback on the ground. So when you see that stuff start to transfer, like there's an old saying, sometimes I may have doubted a little bit, you practice how you play, but no, this was the epitome of that. And you saw the second round pick out of Clemson doing this doggone thing today, and it was really cool to watch.
How about for you, Free, on the defensive side of the ball? Who would you say stood out?
Yeah, it was nice seeing Ruke basically on that sack do something I don't think he did at all at Clemson, just a clean pass rush move to get home. But to me, because I knew Jarvis was probably going to go with the trench guy, so I got to go with the secondary guy. Natrone Brooks was out there laying the wood for everybody. He was out there. I think he led the team with like 13 tackles. It was pretty much anytime you threw the ball in his area, he was going to put that receiver on the ground, and that receiver was going to remember, hey, this number 35 guy, this guy's a problem. Even when Anthony Johnson bit on that double move that gave up the big touchdown, I saw Natrone Brooks talking trash to the receiver as he was going back to the sideline. I'm assuming he's saying, like, if you had run that against me, you wouldn't have gotten that touchdown. So I like to see that from Natrone Brooks, making this back in cornerback battle a real battle now, where, you have Anthony Brooks, you have Kevin King, you have Natrone Brooks. Any one of these guys, I think, are now fighting for a roster spot. And this was one of the more impressive cornerback preseason games I've seen. I don't know, like, I got to go back to like Brent Grimes, maybe in like 2007 or something like that, in terms of what I saw from Natrone Brooks today. So I was very impressed with it.
Yeah. And I think there are a couple of things that you guys are talking about that we're starting to see that we've been begging of. And granted, we know we're going to see more and more of some of the things we've been looking for just by the signings that we saw this week by the Falcons. So we know that it's coming. We know that it's coming, right? With Judon and both Simmons. But I think to see the individuals, especially like you said, the draft pick, wanting to see something out of them that maybe you didn't see in week one, and also wanting to see kind of that edge, for lack of a better term, kind of come out on the defensive side of the ball. I think that's so important too, because where you see it now, it's just what Jarvis said. I mean, how you practice is how you play. And now you're starting to see that take full shape and take scope in the second game of the preseason.
And another thing that I saw on defense, and it was like on the defensive line as a whole, not only just Ruke. Like you think about guys like Brandon Dorlus, those guys, all those guys were just up there, just being active, using their hands, getting up into the offensive lineman's pass and trying to get off, right? When they recognize his pass, and I saw a lot of tackle for losses. Like I saw JD Bertrand getting in the backfield. I saw Milo Eifler make some TFL. So those are some of the things that you talk about when you start off like that. That means that, hey, those guys were understanding what the assignment was when that Jimmy Lake was trying to convey, because they knew that all of the starters and all of the backups and everybody else wasn't playing today. So we need to see something from you all. So I think that was the big thing for me. Not only just Ruke, going out there and doing this thing, and Natrone Brooks going out and do this thing. I feel like there was a message that was trying to be sent, within that locker room, saying, hey, here's how we want to play. And I need you guys to get up to this standard if you want to make this team. So, yeah, it was really cool to watch all that come together.
Now, Aaron, we know that we don't have what we had in the past, which was cuts until you get to the 53-man roster. There will just be that one cut, if you will. However, there are individuals who showed something last week that got them sent packing, Nathan Rourke. But there are individuals who you guys might say as well have done the same thing this week. Is there anyone free, especially on the defensive side of the ball, where you said, ooh, that person disappointed, or ooh, your roster spot might be in jeopardy?
I wouldn't. At first glance, I don't know if there was someone that jumped out to me that disappointed.
Which is good. Good.
It felt like pretty much everybody that was inactive, and I know we'll talk about that later, is probably assured a roster spot. And so a lot of the guys that were playing today are really, I think, more fighting, basically beyond the rookies, or should I say the draft picks specifically, not just all rookies. Mm-hmm. Pretty much everybody else that played today, to me, is kind of fighting for a practice squad spot. And so, probably the one thing that stands out to me from a negative sense on the defensive side of the ball is just that double move that Anthony Johnson gave up on that touchdown, where he just bit hard. And I thought he was one of the front runners coming off of the previous Miami game in terms of, potentially like CB6 on the depth chart or something like that. And I do think he probably hurt himself today with, giving up that big play. So he's probably the one guy that stands out in a negative way.
How about you, JD? Is there somebody?
Yeah, it has to be D'Angelo Malone for me. When you think about being out there, in run situations and not necessarily being able to hold his ground on that aspect of it. He had one rush that I thought was pretty solid, and he was kind of made the quarterback kind of move just a little bit off his mark. But I think that when you have a guy like him who's a third-round pick, and he should be standing on the sidelines in plain clothes, because, have that sure roster spot like Aaron talked about. Mm-hmm. So it's just, for me, I just feel like he's in trouble. I know I talked about the special teams play and all that stuff last week. I ain't necessarily really see that flying around like I'm used to seeing from him. Mm-hmm. If you are playing at this moment right now, where a lot of the guys who are going to be getting a lot of playing time and starting, and the guys that are going to be starting, like I feel like D'Angelo Malone may have put some tape out there today to say the Falcons, like, hey, we might need to go ahead and pop that bubble, but hopefully he continues to show that, hey, I can rush the passer at least to be one of those guys. But I feel like he just didn't do that today.
Yeah. Now there's a guy who we didn't see, and we wondered, has he shown enough for us to not have seen him? We'll talk about that and download on it in the deep dive. This episode of the Locked On Falcons Postcast is brought to you by Game Time. So think about this. Game Time, of course, is the authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets faster and easier. But prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to first pitch. So with killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets. So think about priority last-minute deals. You can save up to 60% off buying last minute for sports, comedy, theater, etc. Flash deals. You can save even more with exclusive in-app deals on select seats ahead of the game or an event. And Game Time actually has a guarantee where your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticket industry and the lowest price guarantee, or Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. So take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use Locked On NFL for $20 off your first purchase. Again, that's Game Time. Download that app, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDON NFL for $20 off. Download it today as soon as you finish watching our Locked On Falcons postcast. Last minute tickets on Game Time, lowest price guaranteed. All right, guys. So we know that the thought was, what are we going to see today out of Michael Penix Jr., right? That was kind of the excitement because, hey, we saw him out on the field earlier this week at practice. There was no reason to think that we wouldn't see him until we didn't see him in game 2. So we know that post-game, Raheem Morris was asked that question of, hey, why didn't Michael Penix actually suit up? And he said that what went into the decision for Michael Penix Jr. not to play was that Raheem Morris felt that Penix had shown the coaching staff enough in that first preseason game in Miami that they didn't feel the need to play him today. So for you, Aaron, did Penix show you enough in that first game to say, hey, we're good to go with QB2?
I mean, yes, if the bar is to, are you a better option than Taylor Heineke at QB2? Sure, yes, he showed enough. But if the bar is like anything else, no, I wanted to see more.
It's a low bar. You better be better.
It's the lowest bar possible if that's what the bar is. And so it's just like, no, I wanted to see more Michael Penix. Like, treat him like every other team treats a first-round quarterback, which is they play all 3 preseason games. That's just the way it is. Not to mention, because other teams are playing these guys because, they got to get them ready for their season because these guys are going to play this year. The Falcons need to play Penix because he's not going to play, and this is really the only time he's going to get reps because once we get to the season, he ain't, the quarterback too don't take reps anymore. So he needs all the reps he can get now when he has that opportunity to get those. I get why Raheem Morris didn't want to play him. The injuries, I think that, Jarvis and I talked about that. We talked about 26 players inactive last time. That number was definitely going to go up after the injuries to 36 this week. But I felt like it should have been 35. The one guy that should have played out of that 36 was Michael Penix.
Yeah, I would have to agree with you as well, because as much as I liked seeing what he was able to do in the first game, I felt like, okay, I'd like to see a little more, even if it was just Jarvis, a little bit of here and there. Like, I know for the most part, there was 11 personnel today, probably like 90% of the time. And we understand that things are vanilla during preseason, but maybe I'd like to see them like maybe ratchet it up one level more and say, like, let's throw a little bit more of this complex piece to Michael Penix Jr. or just, something that gave us, even if it was just like one quarter or a couple series. I think for me, I would have wanted to see him in action a little bit more than the non-elite processors that we kind of had to see all of today.
I love that pettiness. It's just oozing out of your soul right there, T. But yeah, like I agree. I wholeheartedly agree, because here's the thing. All we need is one drive. And Freud, I was talking about this before the show. If the second offensive line prove to us that they are trash, man, MPX down on the bottom, and he can get to work in practice, and he'll be fine. He'll be totally fine. But no, that offensive line looked really solid last week in pass pro, and they did a really solid job this week in pass pro. And know how that they did a solid week, a solid job in pass pro this week is the fact that, there were times where Taylor Heineke I was able to really feel that he holds onto the ball too much. He holds onto the ball too long. He'll tuck that bad boy, and then next thing you know, that's when guys get up on him, and then it kind of gives you a peek into what we saw last year. Now, because of what Desmond Ridder was able to do or not do when, getting rid of the football. So I just feel, for the reasons of having a solid backup offensive line, I feel, and how the elite processor, that that Michael Penix is, he's able to get rid of the football. He's not going to take no licks. He's not going to take no unnecessary licks.
Yeah.
So, and he's not really looking to run the football anyway. So, for all of those reasons right there, I feel like we could have at least got maybe one solid drive.
Yeah.
And then, then you ratchet it down and take him on out, and then, let him do his be on the sidelines chilling with his skull cap on. I mean, come on, man. Or do-rag. I'm sorry, my bad. Do-rag. Keep his do-rag on.
Whatever you want to call it, man. Different strokes for different folks on how MPX was on the sidelines. But what we did get to see a lot of today, Free, that we weren't necessarily expecting or hoping for, was Taylor Heinicke. Now, granted, he performed better than last week, but that could also be, like you said, sort of a low ceiling. So I'm not sure what that really means in the general scheme of things, but he did go 8 of 16, 414 yards, no sacks, no picks. So for you, and that compares to John Paddock, who went 9 of 17 for 78 yards, and of course, no picks, no sacks as well. But what were your thoughts on Heinicke? I mean, did you see a better Heinicke than you saw last week in terms of, I don't know, securing the third spot? Or did you see something out of Paddock that said, he might be the better guy in this system for going forward?
I mean, Heinicke was better. That's what I'll say. He was better. But again,
get it out.
Last week, it was just like, okay, like I don't even think it's possible to get worse than what Heinicke was last week. So I don't know. It's just like Paddock came out. He was a little rough. I think he settled in at a certain point, and they were able to start moving the ball, especially on that final drive to get down the field. Although it was notable to me that they were running a lot with like 3 minutes to go in the fourth quarter, and it's like this kind of tells you everything you need to know about their faith in John Paddock. That Jace McCullum's getting more touches than the quarterback is on what should be the game-winning, game-tying drive or whatever. So, I guess, Heinicke is Heinicke. I at this point in time, it's just like I don't even get mad when Taylor Heinicke is doing Taylor Heinicke things, because it's just like this is who he is. This is, this can be fun when it's working, but most of the time it doesn't work. So it's just like, all right, just like, okay, just it is what it is. I don't know.
It is what it is. Jarvis, I want to ask you a question that I think I know the answer to already, but I'm just going to ask you anyway. Since Free gave us such a great assessment of what Heinicke was or wasn't today and what Paddock was or wasn't today, I just want to add two things. And then I want to ask you a question about the offense in terms of like a Casey Washington or Jace McClellan. Is that okay?
That's fine. Let's
I know you had something like a burning desire to say something else about Heinicke or Paddock. If you don't have a burning desire, the only thing I would say is, like we're talking about on a serious note, when we talk about elite processing, there was a moment where Casey Washington was right there and should have had a ball in his hand. And yet, we saw what happened under center, and Taylor Heinicke just could not make it happen. That wasn't Casey's fault. That was way more on Taylor, because the question became, well, who were you throwing the ball to? Like, where were you throwing it to? So that was kind of a questionable decision-making for me. And then on the opportunity that Paddock had to show himself good, where he could have run that ball in as opposed to tossing it off on the 2-point conversion, I would have preferred to see him to make the call like, no, you run it in. You have the opportunity to do that. You do that. But speaking of, wanted to ask you guys about those who may have stood out on the offensive side of the ball. Jarvis, I know you actually already mentioned one, which was that second string O-line, which showed up and showed out again this week. But who else for you on offense did?
Wow. I mean, to be honest with you, I want to give like a little light to the Heinicke and Paddock experience. I'm going to say Zach Robinson. For him to be able to essentially switch up what they're trying to do, because he was turning around, handing the ball off a lot, and for good reason, because we saw once they drop back and start asking the quarterbacks to go through their progressions like they normally do in this offense, it looked a little sketchy. So you start to see a lot more running, and then they start to build off of that with the play action and the boots and everything like that, because when you rolling out on those boots, and maybe 1 or 2 reads, if the tight end not there, you take off and run with it. Essentially, that's all you do. When you limit the options for certain quarterbacks, they flourish. They tend to flourish. So I like what I saw from Zach Robinson being able to adjust and knowing what he has out there on the field. He's like, hey, I don't have MPX anymore. I'm not going to have Kirk at all in the preseason. So here's what we're going to do, guys, because we need to start moving this ball a little bit. So, yeah, I'll give a kudos to Zach Robinson, the OC, in his first year calling plays. I give him a little kudos for, making the necessary adjustments.
Yeah, knowing your personnel. What about you, Free?
I mean, if I'm talking about an offensive player that stood out, I thought Chris Blair, like last week, it was Casey Washington, and Chris Blair had that one big catch and then had the fumble. And I thought this week it was Chris Blair that stood out, being able to turn some short gains into some big gains, being able to be that open man on some of these crossers and whatnot. And unfortunately, I don't think Casey Washington got a catch despite getting 6 targets, but I think that's more on the quarterbacks than it was on the Casey Washington. But it was, it was nice. That was one of the questions I had about, because we kind of knew going into camp before Rondale Moore's injury, kind of like who was going to be the 5 or 6 guys atop the depth chart. And then it was just going to be a question, would somebody else come up and make a case that we would be like, hey, what we thought going into camp was not necessarily going to be the case. And with Rondale Moore's injury, with Jakeem Grant coming to the team and also getting hurt and being on IR as well, that's a golden opportunity for one of these young guys to step up. And I think Chris Blair was the guy that he's going to be the guy that we're going to keep an eye on going into next week's game to be like, can he continue this? Because then we'll have a real conversation about, does he make the 53-man roster at that point?
Well, there's an OG that did some things today that we don't think we want to see continue. We'll talk about that in What's Next. This episode of our Locked On Falcons Postcast is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. Now, it's not just a job board. It helps you hire professionals you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job, but might be open to the perfect role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. And 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours on LinkedIn Jobs. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free and do what 2.5 million small businesses are doing for hiring. They're using LinkedIn. You should use it as well. And remember, terms and conditions do apply. So guys, again, we saw something that was very uncharacteristic, right? And that is kicker Younghoe Koo missing 3 field goal attempts. Now, granted, he did have a long of 54 yards and he was 2 of 5 on the day, but ultimately that's just not what we see now. Raheem Morris said post-game, hey, he'll bounce back this week. He'll be ready to go. And on Koo's tackle on kickoff, he said, I don't want to see him ever do that again. I'm sure you don't want to see your kicker doing that. But I think that there's just a little bit of concern on whether or not, okay, which one is it? Is it the Koo who kicks the long field goal? Because I think he had a 53-yarder last week as well, but missed also on field goals. So it's kind of like, okay, which one is the real one? Which one are we going to get this season? But more importantly, Jarvis, are you concerned about the fact that Koo has missed a couple in both games?
No, not really. Because when you think about what Koo has brought to the table, he is a guy who has been Mr. Consistency in the regular season. I don't try to put too much stock in preseason games. I know we talk about coaches being able to evaluate these guys and being able to look at these guys and see what they're doing and talk about filling out the back end of that roster. Yeah, we got to look at it from that standpoint. But when it comes to the guy that has been pretty consistent ever since he became an Atlanta Falcon, and Younghoe Koo, you got to give him some benefit of the doubt. Now, if we start to see him, if we see him miss some field goals next week in a preseason game, and then we go into the season opener against Pittsburgh, he's still missing field goals, it's time to bring some people in at that point, because you're talking about potentially losing games because of missed field goals, because that we would have started off the show if this was a regular season game talking about Koo's miss, because hey, he would have essentially lost it in the game because you missed 3 field goals. So that's that's why I feel like I'm not too concerned at this point. But if we're talking about this in the regular season, yeah, it's time to bring somebody in, man. You know how with kickers, it ain't no, oh yeah, we're just gonna bring it in and see what's going on. Nah, we coming in and replace your behind.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. That's how Koo got his job. Aaron, what
Right.
about you? What are your thoughts on Younghoe Koo? You're concerned? You're good? What are your things?
No. I mean, no, I'm not concerned about it.
Okay. He's like, no. I'm like, which way? Free? Are you okay?
Koo missed 2 extra points last summer, so I feel like this is not crazy that Koo will get his jitters out of the way in August, so that he'll be clean in September. So, like Jarvis, if we get, the thing with Koo is like he's money at home, right? So if he has issues, occasionally it's outdoors, right? He'll miss some kicks outdoors, and you'll be like, But like he's gone through these little runs where he'll have like a game or two where he'll miss some uncharacteristic kicks, and we'll be like, what's going on with Koo? And then he figures it all out. So he's got a body of work now at this point in time that he deserves the opportunity to figure it all out. So I'm not too worried about it. But yeah, if we get in the regular season, he starts missing some of these routine kicks, especially at the beginning of the year where we have a bunch of home games, like 4 of our first 6 games are home games or something like that. If he's missing in the bins, like then it becomes a bigger concern, because like that's something that we just really haven't seen from him over the last like 4 or 5 years.
Indeed. So Jarvis, we got one more preseason game. It's a home game against the Jacksonville Jaguars Friday night. What are you looking to see in that game, whether that is from a scheme perspective with Zach Robinson, Jimmy Lake, or whether that's from particular players or even position groups? What are you looking to see last week of training camp, last preseason game of this preseason?
I want to see what we started off this show talking about as far as that mindset, that defense coming out, breaking shot, man, working your moves, using those hands up front, coming downhill like Natrone Brooks and separating men from the ball. Like I love to see that type of stuff. If those guys can come out like that, and hey, man, I want to be able to make this squad, because here's the thing. Even if you don't make the squad, somebody else is watching too, because there are a lot of teams out there that are going to be scouring the waiver wire to see who they can pick up, who they can add, because a lot of times there are so many different reasons that go into why a player doesn't make a roster. Because guess what? I would assume that there are going to be some players on the defensive line that teams around the league are going to be looking at the Falcons and see what they do, because it's going to be some hard decisions to make up front, because the Falcons are loaded at that spot. So we'll see how that works out. But yeah, that's what I'm going to have my eye on. I'm going to have my eye on this defense and seeing if they're going to come out with that same mindset like they did to start this game, because I love to see guys going out there and competing for starting gigs or playing time, or just trying to get on the 53 or even the practice squad, because Lord knows, hey, it's some decent money as well.
Yeah. What about you, Aaron? This last week of training camp, this last preseason game, what are you looking for?
Well, the main thing I'm looking for is I want to see Michael Penix play, but I think I'm not going to get that way. So if I have to settle for,
it's over, free. It's over, man.
I know.
The dream is died.
Just 3 passes. Just 3 passes on 2 series. That's all I want.
Even if it's a 3 and out, just give me 1 series, 1, 2, 3 and out. Just something.
That's all I need. But I don't know. Like, it's basically the same thing with Jarvis. Like, who is going to make that bid, that final push to make their name for a roster spot? And some of these young guys that are going to get opportunities, especially the draft picks that we can be pretty confident these guys are going to stick on the roster. Can you make plays to be to the point where if and when you get opportunities in the regular season, can we trust you to step in and do your job in the fall? So that's probably the main thing. But like, yeah, it's just going to be so depressing watching a third preseason games are always the worst anyway. But like, without Penix being out there in the field, it's just going to be tough. It's going to be tough to watch.
Yeah, I figure like fans deserve that. Like that's the only.
You seem like you need a hug, dog.
I mean, people in the bins, like it's
a virtual hug, bro.
It's like you're not going to give them anything. You're not going to give them a little.
You may not even see this guy. You hope not to see this guy for the 2024 season, because you know what that would mean about Kirk Cousins. So assuming that Kirk gets you through all 17 regular season games, this is really it. This is what you're going to see of Michael Penix Jr. on a football field, sort of quote unquote real game time. It's game number 3. So I'm with you. I think can we just get one series? Can we just get one possession? And we're good. I mean, we'll get the MPX fix and then we'll all move on. But I'm sure fans are hoping for the same when they get to the bins come Friday. Thanks to our everydayers for making the Locked On Falcons postcast your first listen of the day. Be sure to stop by Locked On Falcons for your second listen, and be sure to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. We're also free and available wherever you download your podcasts. We'll see you next time.